How can a single outrageous joke at a vow renewal ceremony end with legal documents delivered in broad daylight? What happens when someone's need to always come first leads to losing everything they thought was secure? Can a woman so sure of her own cleverness survive the moment her husband calmly, publicly, and lawfully ends their marriage? The community hall buzzed with anticipation as guests filled folding chairs draped in white fabric. I adjusted my dress one final time, checking my phone's front camera to ensure my makeup looked perfect for the live stream. This vow renewal was going to be everything our original wedding wasn't: bold, modern, and absolutely viral-worthy. "Eirene, you ready?" Lyndon called from the back of the hall. My best friend since college looked devastatingly handsome in his navy suit, the one I'd helped him pick out last month, during one of our shopping trips that had turned into something more intimate than either of us had planned. "More than ready," I called back, my voice carrying across the room. I could see Jonas at the altar, his expression unreadable as always. My husband of 8 years stood there in his conservative black suit, looking every bit the boring IT consultant he was. Sometimes I wondered how I'd ended up with someone so predictable, so utterly lacking in spontaneity. The music began, not the traditional wedding march, but the upbeat pop song I'd chosen specifically for its social media appeal. This was my moment to show everyone what modern love really looked like. I'd been planning this surprise for weeks, and the anticipation was killing me. Instead of walking down the aisle alone, or with my father, I'd arranged for Lynn to escort me. After all, he was my best friend, my confidant, the person who truly understood me. It was just a harmless joke, a way to show the world that marriage didn't have to be stuffy and traditional. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officiant announced, presenting the bride, escorted by her dearest friend, Lyndon Croft. The reaction was immediate and electric. Some guests laughed and applauded, clearly getting the modern twist. Others whispered among themselves, their expressions ranging from confused to disapproving. I could see my mother Claire beaming from the front row, her phone already out and recording. She'd always encouraged me to be bold, to never apologize for being myself. But Jonas's parents, Vera and Mark, sat stiffly in their seats, their faces masks of polite disapproval. Naomi, Jonas's sister, watched her brother with concern etched across her features. And Jonas himself? His jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. "Smile, baby," I whispered to him as Lynn and I reached the altar. "It's just for fun." Lynn squeezed my hand before stepping back, flashing that charming smile that had gotten us both into trouble more than once. "Take care of her," he said to Jonas with a wink that made several guests chuckle. The ceremony proceeded, but I could feel the tension radiating from my husband. Every time I caught his eye, he looked away. When we exchanged our renewed vows, his voice was flat, mechanical. He was being such a drama queen about a simple joke. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant declared. Jonas's kiss was perfunctory, almost cold. The guests cheered anyway, and I immediately pulled out my phone to check the livestream comments. Hundreds of reactions were pouring in. Hearts, laughing emojis, fire symbols. This was exactly the response I'd hoped for. During the reception, I worked the room like a social media influencer, posing for photos and making sure every moment was documented. Lynn stayed close, refilling my champagne glass and making witty comments that had everyone laughing. We were the life of the party, the perfect example of how friendship could enhance rather than threaten a marriage. "Eirene, dear, you look absolutely radiant," my mother said, pulling me aside. "That entrance was inspired. You're showing everyone what confidence looks like." "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd get it." I glanced around the room. "Some people are being a bit dramatic about it, though." She followed my gaze to where Jonas stood alone by the window, nursing a beer and staring out at the parking lot. "Oh, honey, don't worry about him. Men always need time to adjust to bold moves. He'll come around." But as the evening wore on, Jonas became increasingly distant. He barely spoke to anyone. declined to dance, and when people tried to congratulate him, his responses were curt and polite. During the traditional toasts, he raised his glass but didn't drink. I was in the middle of recording a story for Instagram when I noticed him heading for the exit. "Jonas," I called out, but he didn't turn around. Several guests noticed his departure, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. How dare he make me look bad at my own vow renewal? "He's probably just tired," Lynn said smoothly, appearing at my side. "You know how he gets at parties." I nodded, but something cold had settled in my stomach. Jonas never left events early. He was Mr. Responsible, always staying to help clean up or make sure I got home safely. This was different. Later that night, I posted the highlight reel on all my social platforms with the caption, "Modern love means never apologizing for who you are or who matters to you. Some people get it, some don't. Authentic love, dan modern marriage, dan best friends forever." The post exploded overnight. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, dozens of shares. I'd finally gone viral, just like I'd always dreamed. But when I rolled over to share the good news with Jonas, his side of the bed was cold and empty. I found Jonas in the guest room the next morning, already dressed for work despite it being Saturday. His laptop was open on the small desk, and he was methodically organizing papers into neat stacks. "Hey, stranger," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "You missed quite a celebration last night. My post already has over 5,000 likes." He didn't look up from his work. "Congratulations." "Come on, don't be like this. It was just a joke, Jonas. A harmless bit of fun to spice things up." I sat on the edge of the bed, hoping to draw him into conversation. Everyone loved it. Well, almost everyone. "I'm sure they did." His voice was flat, emotionless. "You're being ridiculous, you know that. It's 2024, not 1954. Marriages are supposed to evolve, to be more inclusive of the people who matter to us." I pulled out my phone to show him the comments. "Look, hundreds of people are calling us relationship goals." Finally, he turned to face me. His eyes were different somehow, colder, more calculating. "Eirene, I need you to understand something. What you did last night wasn't modern or progressive. It was humiliating." "Humiliating?" I laughed, but it sounded forced even to my ears. "How is celebrating friendship humiliating? Lynn is important to me. He's been there for me since college, through everything. I'm not going to hide that just because you're insecure." "This isn't about insecurity." Jonas closed his laptop with a soft click. "This is about respect, about boundaries, about the fact that you've been texting him at all hours, going out with him alone, and now parading him around as if he's more important than your actual husband." My heart skipped a beat. How much did he know? "You're being paranoid. Lynn and I are friends. That's all." "Friends don't send the kind of messages you've been sending." His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "I've seen them, Eirene. The late-night texts, the inside jokes, the plans you make without mentioning them to me." Panic fluttered in my chest, but I pushed it down. The best defense was a good offense. "You've been snooping through my phone. That's a violation of my privacy, Jonas. That's not healthy behavior in a marriage." "Your phone was face up on the counter. The messages were right there." He stood up, gathering his papers. "I didn't snoop. I just finally paid attention." "So what if Lynn and I text? So what if we hang out? You're at work all the time, buried in your computers and code. At least he makes time for me. At least he thinks I'm interesting." The words hung in the air between us like poison. I immediately regretted them, but my pride wouldn't let me take them back. Jonas nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "I see. Well, that clarifies things considerably." He walked past me toward the door, then paused. "I'll be staying in here for a while. I think we both need some space to think about what we really want." "Jonas, wait." But he was already gone, and I heard the front door close a moment later. I spent the rest of the weekend riding the high of my viral moment. The video had been picked up by several lifestyle blogs, and I was getting friend requests from people all over the country. Lynn came over Sunday afternoon to help me respond to interview requests from online magazines. "You're famous, babe," he said, scrolling through my notifications. "This could be the start of something big for you, maybe a lifestyle blog, or even a book deal." We were sitting close together on the couch, his arm around my shoulders as we looked at my phone. It felt natural, comfortable in a way that my interactions with Jonas never did anymore. Lynn understood my ambitions, my need to be seen and recognized. "I can't believe Jonas is being such a baby about this," I said, leaning into Lynn's warmth. "It's like he wants me to be invisible, to never have any fun or excitement." "Some people are just threatened by confidence," Lynn murmured, his lips close to my ear. "They want to keep you small because your light makes them feel dim." When Jonas came home that evening, he went straight to the guest room without a word. I could hear him on the phone, his voice too low to make out the words, probably complaining to his sister again, or his parents. They'd never really liked me anyway, always acting like I wasn't good enough for their precious son. Monday morning brought a harsh reality check. My supervisor, Janet, called me into her office before I'd even had my coffee. "Eirene, we need to talk about your social media presence," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "HR has received some concerns about the content you've been posting." "Concerns? What kind of concerns?" I felt defensive immediately. "I haven't posted anything inappropriate." "It's not about appropriateness, exactly. It's about professionalism. You have our company listed in your bio, and some of your recent posts have been provocative. The video from your vow renewal, for instance." I stared at her in disbelief. "That was my personal life, my private celebration." "Which you broadcast to thousands of people," Janet pointed out. "Look, I'm not trying to police your personal choices, but when you represent this company, even indirectly, we need to be careful about the image we're projecting." "So what are you saying? That I can't post about my own life?" "I'm saying you need to be more mindful about what you share publicly. Consider removing the company reference from your profiles, or keep your content more family-friendly." I left her office fuming. How dare they try to control my personal expression? This was exactly the kind of small-minded thinking that kept women from achieving their full potential. I vented to Lynn over lunch, meeting him at our usual cafe downtown. "They're just jealous," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You're getting attention, making waves, and they want to keep you in a box. Don't let them dim your shine." "I know, right? And Jonas is being just as bad. He's barely spoken to me in 3 days. He's acting like I committed some terrible crime." "Maybe he's finally showing his true colors," Lynn suggested. "Maybe this is who he really is. Controlling, jealous, threatened by your success." The thought sent a chill through me, but also a strange sense of validation. Maybe I wasn't the problem here. Maybe I was just finally outgrowing the people who wanted to keep me small. That evening, I found Jonas in the kitchen, making dinner for one. The sight of the single plate setting hit me harder than I expected. "Not making enough for two?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I wasn't sure if you'd be home," he replied without looking at me. "You've been spending a lot of time out lately." I had lunch with Lynn. We were discussing some opportunities that might come from the video going viral. "Of course you were." He turned off the stove and finally faced me. "Eirene, do you even want to be married anymore?" The question caught me completely off guard. "What kind of question is that?" "Of course I do. We just renewed our vows." "Did we?" Because from where I was standing, it looked more like you were making a public declaration that someone else comes first in your life. That's not what it was about, and you know it. You're twisting everything to make me look bad." "I'm not twisting anything. I'm just finally seeing things clearly." He picked up his plate and headed for the guest room. "I've changed the passwords on our joint accounts, by the way. I think it's better if we keep our finances separate for now." "You did what?" Anger flared in my chest. "You can't just unilaterally change our bank access." "Actually, I can. My name is on the accounts too. I'm just protecting our assets while we figure things out. Protecting them from what? From me? He paused in the doorway, his back still to me. From poor decisions. From impulsive choices that might have consequences we can't undo. That night, I lay alone in our king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. All I'd wanted was to have some fun, to show the world that our marriage was modern and secure enough to include other important relationships. But as I replayed the events of the past few days, a nagging worry began to grow in the back of my mind. Jonas wasn't acting like the man I'd married, the quiet, predictable guy who always deferred to my wishes. This version of my husband was calculating, methodical, almost cold in his precision. Around midnight, I heard the printer in his home office whirring to life. What could he possibly be printing at this hour? I crept down the hallway and saw light under the guest room door. Heard the soft clicking of keyboard keys. Whatever Jonas was planning, he was being very thorough about it. The tension at Sunday dinner was thick enough to cut with a knife. We'd gathered at Romano's, the family restaurant where we'd celebrated every major milestone for the past 8 years. But this time felt different, charged with an undercurrent of conflict that no amount of forced cheerfulness could disguise. "So, Eirene," my mother said, raising her wine glass with theatrical flair, "I've been showing that video to everyone at the country club. You looked absolutely stunning. And what a brilliant way to modernize such a stuffy tradition." Across the table, I could see Vera's jaw tighten. Jonas's mother had barely spoken since we'd arrived, her disapproval radiating like heat from a furnace. "It was certainly memorable," Mark said diplomatically, cutting his chicken with unnecessary precision. "Oh, come on, Dad," Naomi interjected, her voice sharp with frustration. "Let's call it what it was, a publicity stunt designed to humiliate Jonas in front of everyone who matters to him." "Naomi," Jonas said quietly, but his sister was just getting started. "No, Jonas, somebody needs to say it. This whole thing was inappropriate and disrespectful, and everyone knows it except apparently Mom and Eirene." My mother's eyes flashed dangerously. "Excuse me, my daughter was expressing her authentic self and celebrating the people who matter to her. If some people are too narrow-minded to appreciate that..." "Authentic?" Naomi laughed bitterly. "Is that what we're calling it?" The adults continued their tense verbal sparring, but it was Poppy's small voice that cut through the noise like a knife. "Mommy, why was Uncle Lynn holding your hand on TV?" The table fell silent. My 6-year-old daughter sat in her booster seat, looking around at all the frozen adult faces with the innocent confusion that only children possess. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I managed, my voice sounding strange and high. "On the video, Grandma Claire showed me on her phone. Uncle Lynn was holding your hand like Daddy does, and you were smiling really big. But Daddy looked sad. Why was Daddy sad at the party?" I felt heat creeping up my neck. "Uncle Lynn was just helping Mommy walk, baby. Like when you help me carry groceries." "But you don't hold hands with the grocery bags," Poppy said with devastating 6-year-old logic. "And you don't look at grocery bags the way you were looking at Uncle Lynn." The silence stretched painfully. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for an explanation that wouldn't come. "Poppy," Jonas said gently, "sometimes grown-ups do things that are hard to understand. What matters is that Mommy and Daddy both love you very much." "Are you getting divorced?" she asked bluntly. "Because Tommy's parents got divorced, and first they stopped holding hands, and then his daddy moved to a different house." "No, baby, we're not," I started, but Jonas interrupted. "We're figuring some things out right now, Poppy, but no matter what happens, you'll always be the most important thing to both of us." His careful non-answer sent a chill down my spine. What did he mean, no matter what happens? "Well, I think this conversation has gone quite far enough," my mother announced, signaling the waiter for another bottle of wine. "Eirene is a grown woman who doesn't need to justify her choices to anyone. If some people can't handle a little modern thinking..." Modern thinking, Vera finally exploded. Is that what you call flaunting an affair at a vow renewal ceremony? Affair? I gasped. There's no affair. Lynn is my friend, my best friend, just because some people have small minds and dirty thoughts. Eirene, Jonas said quietly, please stop. No, I won't stop. I'm tired of everyone acting like I've committed some crime. I'm tired of being made to feel guilty for having meaningful relationships outside my marriage. This is exactly the kind of possessive, controlling behavior that destroys marriages. You're right, Jonas said, his voice so calm it was almost eerie. Controlling behavior does destroy marriages. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. He was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry, not hurt, but almost analytical, like he was studying a particularly interesting specimen. Jonas, his father said carefully, maybe we should change the subject. Actually, I think this conversation is long overdue. Jonas folded his napkin and placed it beside his plate with mechanical precision. Eirene, you keep talking about modern marriage and authentic relationships, but what you're describing isn't modern, it's just selfish. Selfish? I felt my voice rising. How is refusing to be controlled selfish? Because you're not being controlled, you're being held accountable. There's a difference. Accountable for what? For having friends? For refusing to live in your boring little box? For lying. His voice was still quiet, but it carried across the restaurant like a gunshot. For sneaking around. For prioritizing another man's feelings over your husband's. For using our daughter's innocence to deflect from your own choices. I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing like a fish. Where was this coming from? Jonas never confronted anyone, never made scenes. I think, he continued, that we should table this discussion for now. Poppy doesn't need to hear any more of this. He stood up and tossed 2 20s on the table. This should cover our portion. Naomi, would you mind taking Poppy for ice cream? I think the grown-ups need to finish this conversation without little ears around. Of course, Naomi said immediately, already helping Poppy out of her booster seat. Come on, princess, let's go find some chocolate chip cookie dough. As they walked away, Poppy looked back over her shoulder. Daddy, are you coming? In a little bit, sweetheart. Save me a bite. Once they were gone, the table erupted. How dare you speak to my daughter that way, my mother hissed. With respect, Mrs. Marsden, I was speaking honestly about the situation where all pretending doesn't exist. What situation? I demanded. You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal. Jonas pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. Should I show them the text messages, Eirene? The ones where you and Lynn discuss how boring I am. How you wish you'd married someone more exciting. How you can't wait for our next private time. My blood turned to ice. You went through my phone. I didn't have to. You left it open on the kitchen counter. Multiple times. Either you wanted me to see those messages, or you've gotten incredibly careless about covering your tracks. Those messages are private conversations between friends. You're taking them out of context. Am I? He picked up his phone and swiped to something. Here's one from last Tuesday. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. Jonas is working late, so we have the whole evening. Should I read more? The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. Jonas, please. Or this one. He's so predictable and boring. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd chosen differently. That was sent 3 hours before our vow renewal ceremony. My mother's face had gone pale. Even she seemed at a loss for words. The vow renewal wasn't a celebration of our marriage, Jonas continued, his voice still unnaturally calm. It was a public humiliation, designed to make me look like a fool while you flaunted your boyfriend in front of our friends and family. He's not my boyfriend, I whispered, but the words sounded weak even to me. Then what is he, Eirene? Because friends don't usually send photos of lingerie they're planning to wear to surprise each other. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, could feel the stares of other diners who had clearly overheard at least part of our conversation. I think, Jonas said, standing up again, that we've said enough for one evening. I'm going to collect our daughter and take her home. Eirene, you can find your own way back when you're ready. He walked away without another word, leaving me sitting at the table with my parents and his, the weight of their judgment crushing down on me like a physical force. Well, my mother said finally, her voice shaky, I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. These things always blow over. But as I watched Jonas's retreating figure, something told me that this time was different. This time, there might not be any coming back from what had been said. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I was genuinely afraid. The apartment felt like a battlefield when I finally made it home that night. Jonas's car was in the driveway, but the house was eerily quiet. I found him in his home office, surrounded by manila folders and legal pads covered in his precise handwriting. "What's all this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light despite the anxiety gnawing at my stomach. "Organization," he replied without looking up. "I've been letting things get sloppy lately. Time to get everything in order." I moved closer, trying to read over his shoulder, but he calmly closed the folder he'd been working on and turned to face me. "How was the rest of dinner?" he asked conversationally. "Awkward, thanks to your little performance." I crossed my arms, falling back on anger because it felt safer than the fear creeping up my spine. "You had no right to air our private business in front of everyone." "Our private business?" Jonas tilted his head slightly. "Is that what we're calling it?" "You know what I mean. Marriage problems should be handled between spouses, not turned into public spectacles." Interesting perspective. He picked up a pen and made a note on one of his legal pads. "Tell me, when you decided to have Lynn walk you down the aisle, was that handling our marriage problems privately?" I felt heat rise in my cheeks. That wasn't about problems. That was about inclusion, about showing that our marriage is strong enough to celebrate all our important relationships. "Uh-huh." He made another note. "And the text messages, the private meetings, the lies about where you've been spending your afternoons. That's all about inclusion too?" "I never lied. Last Tuesday you told me you were having coffee with your sister, but your sister was in Denver for a conference. I know because she posted about it on Facebook." My mouth went dry. I must have gotten confused about the day. "Wednesday, you said you were shopping for Poppy's birthday present, but you came home empty-handed and couldn't explain what stores you'd visited." "I didn't find anything I liked. Thursday, you were supposedly at a work happy hour that ended at 10 p.m., but your co-worker Janet posted photos from that happy hour at 6:30, and you weren't in any of them." Each accusation hit like a physical blow. How had he become so observant? Jonas used to barely notice when I got my hair cut, and now he was tracking my movements like a detective. "You're keeping tabs on me," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and outrage. "That's not normal behavior, Jonas. That's obsessive." "Is it?" He opened a different folder and pulled out a printed email. "This is from our cell phone provider. It shows text message frequency between numbers. Would you like to guess which number you've been texting most frequently over the past 3 months?" I didn't need to guess. "You had no right to access those records." "Actually, I had every right. I'm the primary account holder. My name is on the contract." He set the paper aside and picked up another document. "This is our credit card statement. Interesting how many charges there are at restaurants and hotels I've never been to." "Those were work lunches. At the Marriott downtown, for 4 hours on a Tuesday afternoon." His voice remained maddeningly calm. "What kind of work lunch requires a hotel room, Eirene?" The walls felt like they were closing in. "You're twisting everything, making innocent things sound sinister." "Am I?" He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. "This is the security footage from our building's parking garage. Timestamp shows last Friday at 2 p.m. Would you like to see who gets out of your car with you?" On the screen, I could see myself and Lynn walking toward the elevator, his arm around my waist, my head on his shoulder. We looked like lovers. "That doesn't prove anything," I said weakly. "Doesn't it?" Jonas closed the laptop. You know what the interesting thing is about evidence, Eirene? It doesn't lie. It doesn't rationalize or make excuses. It just is. I sank into the chair across from his desk, feeling like I was drowning. What do you want from me, Jonas? What is this all about? It's about truth. It's about consequences. It's about the fact that you've been living a double life and expecting me to pretend I don't notice. I never meant for things to go this far. How far exactly? How far did you mean for them to go? He leaned forward slightly, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you meant for them to go exactly as far as they've gone. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught. Tears started flowing down my cheeks, but Jonas's expression didn't soften. If anything, he looked more resolved. I want to save our marriage, I said desperately. I want to fix this. Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise. Your actions suggest you've already chosen what you want. That's not true. Yes, I made some mistakes, but I love you. I love our family. You love the security I provide. You love the respectability of being married. But do you love me? He stood up and walked to the window. When was the last time you chose me over Lynn? When was the last time you considered my feelings before making a decision? I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. The truth was, I couldn't remember. I thought so, Jonas said quietly. It doesn't have to be this way, I pleaded. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. Can we? Because that would require you to end your relationship with Lynn. Completely. No contact, no friendship, no nothing. Are you willing to do that? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I knew what the right answer was, what any marriage counselor would say, what basic common sense dictated. But the thought of cutting Lynn out of my life entirely made my chest tight with panic. I need time to think about that. Jonas nodded as if my hesitation confirmed everything he'd suspected. That's what I thought. He gathered up his folders and headed for the door. Where are you going? I called after him. To check on Poppy, and then I have some phone calls to make. What kind of phone calls? He paused in the doorway. The kind that should have been made weeks ago. That night, I lay in bed listening to the low murmur of Jonas's voice from the guest room. He was on the phone for hours, speaking in tones too quiet for me to make out words, but urgent enough to keep me awake with worry. Around 2 a.m., I heard him moving around in his office again. The printer was running almost constantly, and I could see light under the door until nearly dawn. When I woke up the next morning, he was already gone. But there was a note on the kitchen counter in his precise handwriting. Taking Poppy to school. We'll pick her up as well. Don't wait up tonight, I'll be working late. It was the first time in 8 years of marriage that Jonas had handled school pickup without discussing it with me first. The first time he'd made unilateral decisions about our daughter's schedule. And somehow, that small act of independence scared me more than all his evidence and accusations combined. I called Lynn in a panic. He knows, I said as soon as he answered. He knows everything. Calm down, babe. What exactly does he know? The texts, the hotel, the parking garage footage. He's been documenting everything like some kind of private investigator. There was a long pause. Okay, that's not great, but it's not the end of the world either. So what if he knows? You're adults. You have the right to make your own choices. Lynn, he's talking about divorce, about taking Poppy. He's got lawyers. Whoa, slow down. How do you know he's got lawyers? He's been making phone calls, printing documents. There are folders everywhere labeled with legal terms. Look, even if he files for divorce, it doesn't mean he'll get everything he wants. You're Poppy's mother. You have rights too. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jonas was several steps ahead of me in a game I was just beginning to understand we were playing. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't sure I was going to win. The next 2 weeks passed in an eerie state of suspended animation. Jonas continued sleeping in the guest room, continued his methodical documentation routine, continued treating me with the distant politeness usually reserved for strangers. But there was something different now, something that made my skin crawl with anxiety. He wasn't angry anymore. The Jonas I'd married would have yelled, would have demanded explanations, would have tried to fight for our marriage with passion and desperation. This new version of my husband was calm, almost serene in his detachment. He spoke to me only when necessary, usually about Poppy's schedule or household logistics. When I tried to engage him in deeper conversations about our future, he would simply nod and say, "We'll figure it out." "He's planning something," I told Lynn during one of our clandestine coffee meetings. "I can feel it." "Maybe he's finally accepting reality," Lynn suggested, stirring sugar into his latte. "Maybe he's realizing that you're not happy and he can't force you to stay. But he's so calm about it. That's not like him. Jonas doesn't handle change well. He should be freaking out, trying to win me back, something." Some people shut down when they're overwhelmed. Maybe this is his way of coping. But I wasn't convinced. There was something calculating in Jonas's newfound serenity that set off every alarm bell in my head. At home, he'd taken over most of Poppy's care with quiet efficiency. He made her breakfast, packed her lunch, helped with homework, and read bedtime stories. When I tried to insert myself into these routines, he didn't object, but he didn't need me either. It was as if he was practicing being a single parent. "Daddy's been sad," Poppy told me one evening as I tucked her into bed. "He tries to smile, but his eyes look sad." "Daddy and Mommy are just working through some grown-up stuff, baby. It'll be okay." "Are you sad too?" The question caught me off guard. Was I sad? I was anxious, frustrated, angry, confused, but sad. I wasn't sure anymore. "Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings," I said finally. "But I love you more than anything in the whole world, and that will never change." "I know, Mommy, but do you love Daddy?" Out of the mouths of babes. "Of course I do, sweetheart." But as I said the words, I wondered if they were still true, or if they'd ever been true in the way that mattered. The breakthrough came on a Thursday morning when I was running late for work and couldn't find my car keys. I finally found them in Jonas's office, sitting on top of one of his manila folders. As I grabbed them, I accidentally knocked the folder to the floor, spilling its contents. What I saw made my blood run cold. Bank statements showing transfers I didn't know about, copies of our mortgage documents, a detailed inventory of our household possessions with estimated values, a timeline of my activities over the past 3 months, complete with dates, times, and photographic evidence. And at the bottom of the pile, a business card for a law firm downtown. I gathered everything up with shaking hands, trying to put it back in order, but the damage was done. I now knew with absolute certainty what Jonas was planning. That evening, I confronted him directly. "I know you're seeing a lawyer," I said, cornering him in the kitchen after Poppy had gone to bed. He didn't deny it. "Yes, I am." "How long?" 2 weeks. Since the day after our family dinner." "Jonas, please. We can still fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems." "Our problems?" He turned to face me fully for the first time in days. "Eirene, we don't have problems. You have a boyfriend. That's not a problem to be solved. It's a choice you made." "I'll end it. I'll cut all contact with Lynn if that's what it takes." "Will you?" "Because you've had multiple opportunities to make that choice and you haven't. Even now, knowing that I know everything, you're still meeting him for coffee. You're still texting him. You're still choosing him." "How do you—" I started, then stopped. Of course he knew. He knew everything. "I'm not angry anymore, Eirene. I was for a while. I was hurt and confused and desperate to understand how we got here. But now I'm just done." "Done?" The word came out as a whisper. "Done pretending this is a marriage worth saving. Done pretending you haven't already checked out. Done letting you make a fool of me while I stand by and watch." "What about Poppy? What about our family?" "Poppy will be fine. Children are resilient. especially when they're removed from toxic situations. As for our family, he shrugged. What family? We haven't been a family for months. We've been 3 people living in the same house, going through the motions. I don't want a divorce, I said desperately. I don't want to lose everything we've built. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to build something else with someone else. The finality in his voice was terrifying. This wasn't the Jonas I knew, the man who avoided confrontation and always tried to keep the peace. This was someone harder, more decisive, someone who had clearly made up his mind and wouldn't be swayed. What happens now? I asked. Now you'll receive some paperwork, and then we'll proceed according to the law. When? Soon. That night, I called my mother in tears. He's going to divorce me, Mom. He's got lawyers and evidence and a whole plan. Oh, honey, she said, her voice soft with sympathy. I'm sure it's not as bad as you think. Men always threaten divorce when they're upset. He'll calm down. This isn't a threat. He's past anger, past upset. He's resolved. Well, then maybe it's for the best. Maybe you're just incompatible. You're still young, still beautiful. You'll find someone who appreciates your spirit. But her words felt hollow. For the first time, I was beginning to understand what I might actually be losing. Not just the security of marriage, but Poppy's daily presence, the home we'd built together, the life I'd taken for granted, and Jonas himself, the steady, reliable man I'd dismissed as boring, but who had been the foundation of everything stable in my world. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my quest for excitement and validation, I might have destroyed the very things that had given my life meaning. On Friday morning, Jonas left early for work without saying goodbye. He'd been doing that a lot lately, but this time felt different, more final. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Vash, this is Patricia from Hendricks, Morrison and Associates. Could you please confirm your current address? We have some documents that need to be delivered. My hand started shaking. What kind of documents? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details over the phone, ma'am, but we do need to arrange for proper service. Would you prefer delivery to your home or workplace? I don't know. I need to think about it. Of course, but ma'am, we do need to complete service within the next 24 hours. If you're not available at either location, we can arrange for service at a public location of your choosing. After I hung up, I sat in my office, staring at the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was really happening. After 8 years of marriage, Jonas was actually going through with it. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting, but got no response. It was as if he'd simply vanished from my life, leaving only lawyers and legal documents in his wake. The man I'd married would never have been this cold, this calculating. But then again, the woman he'd married would never have done what I'd done. We'd both become people we didn't recognize. And now we were about to face the consequences. The call came at 8:47 a.m. Patricia from the law firm was firm. Personal service required. Jonas had specified the Civic Plaza outside the courthouse, public, with witnesses. I arrived at 11. Jonas sat on a bench near the fountain, composed in his best suit, a stranger in familiar clothes. He stood as I approached. Thank you for coming, Eirene. Why here? Why public? Because I wanted witnesses. Before I could argue, the process server approached with a manila envelope. Mrs. Eirene Vash, you've been served. People were already staring, phones out, recognizing us from the viral video that had started everything. Jonas's voice carried clearly. Our marriage ended the day you chose someone else over your husband. Our family ended when you humiliated us for social media attention. He opened a thick folder. Everything's documented. Every lie, every secret meeting, every text with Lynn. The missed school pickups, the forgotten commitments, the nights you chose him over Poppy. I felt the ground shift. You can't take full custody. I'm her mother. You're a mother who's been too busy with her boyfriend and Instagram to notice your daughter, asking why Mommy doesn't love Daddy anymore. The crowd grew, recordings rolled. Jonas continued calm and precise. I'm filing for divorce on irreconcilable differences and seeking full custody. You'll get the details from my lawyer. I don't have a lawyer. Then get one, quickly. He closed his briefcase. I've moved out. Naomi is picking Poppy up from school today. She'll stay with her until custody is settled. You can't just take my daughter. I'm protecting her. There's a difference. He turned to leave, then paused. That viral video you're so proud of, my lawyer says it's perfect evidence of your priorities. Thank you for documenting your own betrayal. He walked away. I stood alone in the plaza, envelope in hand, surrounded by strangers and cameras. The papers inside outlined the legal end of everything: custody, assets, alimony. My phone buzzed. Lynn, asking how it went, suggesting coffee. I deleted the message. For the first time in months, I didn't want his company. I wanted my daughter. I wanted the quiet, steady life I'd dismissed as boring. But Poppy wasn't coming home today. And Jonas was gone, the foundation I'd taken for granted now removed. I drove to an empty house, carrying the weight of consequences I'd never believed would arrive. I had declared my best friend came first. Now I understood the price. Some choices, once made, cannot be undone.